Hello. This PowerPoint is intended to provide clarity around the Perkins grant requirements, application, and budget process. This presentation will provide you an understanding of the purpose of the Perkins Act, the requirements of the Act, the permissible use of funding, and how to properly code planned purchases in the budget section. As you note, the purpose of the Act was to provide for all the overall improvement of CTE programs and with increased focus on the academic achievement of students participating in CTE courses or programs, the strengthening the connection between secondary and post-secondary to ease the transition, and improving accountability, the performance and outcomes of CTE students. Meeting or exceeding core performance measures is a requirement of the grant. The state is accountable to the Department of Education for the measures you see listed here, which means that you, as a recipient of funds, are responsible. DPI compiles the data for these measures through district reports and internal data systems for submission to the Department of Education. ACT Plus test scores determine the 1S1 and 1S2 measures. Receiving technical certifications, high school completion and graduation, placement after secondary education, and participation in and completion of non-traditional occupational training are included. The Act requires that certain activities must be provided either through the grant funds or through local funding sources. These activities align with the purpose of the Act outlined in the earlier slides. For example, we have the federal requirement in the left column. The right column provides examples for you to consider. The required activities are a part of your budget planning process and are your rationale or goal for line item budgeting. If you do not have a budget item that aligns with one of these required activities, your agency must certify that other funds are being used for the activity. So, for example, the first required activity, seen on the top row, are those that strengthen the academic and CTE skills of students through course integration and course sequences leading to a degree. An example of an allowable expense could be salary for curriculum development over the summer, or a resource teacher to help boost reading and math. The second activity are activities linking secondary CTE with post-secondary through the implementation of programs of study. And you can see some examples there in the right-hand column. Thirdly, activities that provide students with strong experience in and understanding all aspects of an industry, which may include work-based learning. And again, the right column enumerates examples. Two more of those required activities include activities that develop, improve, or expand CTE technology, including training for students and teachers, teaching the skills needed to enter technology fields, and providing internships and mentoring to improve the math and science knowledge of students. Professional development on effective course integration, parental and community involvement, the use of research and data, industry standards, and effective use of technology in education are both required activities. And here we have the last three of the required activities, also referred to as the rationale or goals in the budgeting section. Activities that initiate, improve, expand, and modernize quality CTE programs and skill achievement, including relevant technology. Activities that develop and implement evaluations of CTE programs, including assessment of how the needs of special populations are being met. And activities to prepare special populations enrolled in CTE programs for high-skill, high-wage, or high-demand occupations. Likewise, there are permissible activities or spending. Here is a list of those activities. You may use Perkins dollars for permissive activities as long as the required activities are being addressed first. If you select permissible activities as the rationale for an item being purchased, you must indicate which of these you are addressing in the description field of the budget, along with the description of the purchase. You can always use other funding sources for these activities, which you do not need to record in your budget. All applicants must have a minimum formula allocation of over $15,000. This is generally posted the first week in March. Also, consortium agreements should be in place between the fiscal agent and member districts, which is held locally. Applicants must employ a CTE coordinator, LVEC. State law says CTECs must hold a license as such, who provides leadership for CTE programming as well as the Carl Perkins grant for the district and serves as the DPI contact. Assurances must be signed by the local education agency signing authorities, but should be read and fully understood by the CTE coordinator, district designee, and LEA administration. The state fiscal year goes from July 1st through June 30th of the following year. The application is completed in the WISE Grants portal and will be due April 30th. Applications are completed and submitted by either a single district or by a consortia fiscal agent. The function of a consortia is to combine funds and have coordinated planning between the member districts that will lead to effective implementation of CTE and the Perkins Act. So why would a district want to join a consortium? Most often we see districts participate who do not meet the $15,001 threshold. There can also be benefit of collaborative planning and sharing of resources. Or in other cases, the district does not employ a licensed CTEC to lead the CTE programs. Pre-application tasks. The application is accessed through the WISE Grants portal by personnel who have been granted access to the system by the district's security administrator located at the district. Every district, usually a person authorized by the school board to make decisions on behalf of the district, must select if the district will manage their own funds, join a consortium, or surrender their funds back to DPI for allocating to other districts. Joining a consortium requires entering into an agreement with the fiscal agent of the consortium. If you plan to join a consortium, this should be completed prior to making the selection in WISE Grants. LEAs who choose to join a consortium as a member, the authorizer must sign an electronic verification following the selection. There will be a new field called Program Coordinator Contact. You should put the CTE coordinator contact information in that field. For member districts of a consortium, this should be filled in with the district designee who will be working with the fiscal agent. CTE coordinators are responsible for making sure all application tasks are completed as prescribed. Once the preliminary work is done, there are 3 main sections to the application, which you will access by clicking on Change Act here at the top bar, and then click on one of the 3 sections indicating above to work on. There is a screenshot there for your review. The first application requirement is an annual one. The data from your non-compliant spreadsheet, currently located on the Perkins application webpage, will pre-fill into this section. For consortia, as members join, fiscal agents will see the data for member districts pre-fill into this section after the fund management task is completed. Rather than the spreadsheet workbook used in the past, you will now have narrative fields to complete related to the indicator that was not met and the strategy that you plan to implement to meet the compliance levels. Please note that having a meeting to discuss data is not an acceptable strategy. You must indicate an actual intervention based on your root cause analysis that was decided upon when you met to discuss your data, which, if it hasn't happened already, should be happening at this time. Last year's narrative section responses can be applied to this year's application. Your requirement here is to indicate if you have changes to your program that require a change to the narrative responses from last year by indicating a yes or a no. For example, if you're a consortium who will have a new member this year, you will need to include them in your narrative for this year. If you are a single district who highlighted a program of study that is no longer being offered, you will need to edit your narrative as well. If you indicate yes, the section will unlock for you to make edits to last year's plan. You will not have to rewrite the entire section, just edit the parts you choose. On to the budget. Spending may only target programs of study that are aligned with local labor market information, the workforce community, and local economic development needs. An advisory board or team with varying stakeholders must have input into the program of study and priorities for the budget. To be approved, any line item must be reasonable and necessary and be fundamental to the development, implementation, or refinement of a program of study. Or it must be for the purpose of the non-compliance with core performance indicator activity requirement. Additionally, the expense must also be connected to a course taught by a CTE licensed teacher, include a clear detailed description of the expense in the budget, targeted to 7th grade or above, and doesn't supplant district or other funds previously used for the expense. Budget sections include the following: personnel, such as salaries and benefits, services being purchased, such as professional development, student travel, employee travel, or contracted services, non-capital objects, which are purchases under $5,000, capital objects for purchases over $5,000, and other, which will include membership fees. Indirect costs are general administration costs not assigned to one person or activity. We'll talk about direct administration costs later, but indirect costs will be recorded in the drop-down heading that you see in the screenshot and is associated with the overall operation costs, such as fiscal operations of the business office personnel, and are not identified in the drop-down menu. In the case of a consortium, funds are pooled for the benefit of all members in order to leverage programs and activities so that they are of sufficient size and scope to be effective. Members determine a plan for prioritizing costs annually. The budget section in WISE grants has drop-down functionality that meets state and federal accounting requirements referred to as the Wisconsin Uniform Financial Account Reporting System, otherwise known as WUFR. The WUFR guide found on the DPI website directs how purchases must be coded. For every purchase, you will select an activity or purchase related to a function code. You will fill in the dollar amount. You will select a program of study for that activity, include a detailed description of the item being purchased, and you will select the rationale or goal for that activity. And the rationale options consist of those required activities we went over earlier. If the purchase is not related to a required activity, such as a permissible activity, you will be asked to certify that the required activity is being paid for with local funds. School districts field are for consortia to fill out only. Ledger and vendor fields, not shown here, is for local use only and is not seen by the reviewers. The primary function categories for purchases are the same as they have been in the past and include supervision and coordination, instruction costs, and support services. Every budgeted item will fit into one of two main categories, either direct administrative cost or a CTE program cost. Administrative functions are anything related to administering the grant, such as the percent of salary for the CTE coordinator, unless already paid with another funding source, costs related to required paperwork, documentation, or data collection. If you choose to put a percentage of those funds toward indirect administration, that is fine, but will be recorded in the way mentioned earlier. Program costs are those that deal with development of programs of study, instruction, CTE, curriculum development, and those required or permissible activities we saw earlier. Personnel costs are limited to CTE licensed teachers for work outside of school day to further the program of study curriculum, professional development, or for the CTE coordinator activities. You wouldn't budget for a non-CTE teacher salary or stipend, or for people who are not employees. Purchase services typically include for personnel not employed by the fiscal agent, for employee travel, professional development registration, consultant fees, or student transportation costs. Non-capital objects include equipment with a small unit cost, as well as supplies, computers, and software. The amount of your budget that goes toward consumable supplies should be minimal, making up a very small percentage of your budget. Capital costs are those things above the $5,000 threshold and that have a life of more than a year. Guidance related to equipment purchases and the requirements for documentation records and disposal are available on the DPI website. For an example on how to do the coding process, we're going to walk through personnel. First is the cost related to administration functions related to the grant. This is an example for the CTE coordinator. The grant requires that only licensed CTE teachers and CTE coordinators are allowed to be paid with Perkins, so you see an ELO field. Substitutes and other school personnel, such as clerical, will not be required to fill in the ELO field. In this example, I am budgeting for the CTE coordinator position for administration portion of the salary. Red arrows indicate the required fields. This is an example of coding a non-capital cost. It's for the CTE program, not administration, so you see CTE program selected. And according to this example, it's instructional media of some sort. It is for CTE instruction, which is a part of the vocational curriculum. It is for the purchase of software, and the cost is $500. As mentioned earlier, the ledger and vendor fields are optional for your internal use only, so there is no red arrow. You are asked to complete a detailed description about the purchase. The required rationale for the purchase was selected, providing students with strong experience and understanding all aspects of an industry, and the program of study was selected, programming and software. And as mentioned earlier, a district is only required for the consortium application, so single districts do not need to complete that field. Okay, so now we're going to get into some nitty-gritty examples of errors and best practices when budgeting and coding. Just a forewarning that some of the formatting for the line items aren't perfect due to cutting and pasting and using screenshots and reconfiguring the line item reports from last year. But regardless, it can help identify some common errors and corrections. So let's look at the first line for personnel. A stipend for staff is indicated. The detail says it's the FACS advisor. If you are paying salary or stipend, it must be a person with an appropriate license. You cannot circumvent the ELO requirement by indicating staff. You can only budget for hired employees. Staff refers to district personnel other than teachers, such as counselors, principals, and administrators. Licenses will be looked up automatically via the system. The second line example, this is for the CTEC extended contract. The description also says extended contract. This is incorrect since we already know it's for an extended contract and that it is for administration-related tasks. This is a rare case where further information actually is not needed. It's all self-explanatory from the drop-downs. In the third example, this is a correct example of an extended contract for curriculum development. The description says it will happen in the summer with a focus on curriculum alignment for the accounting POS. This is clear and can be easily reviewed and determined to be an allowed expense by the reviewer. Here in the top example, the rationale that was selected, provide students with a strong experience, does not align with the role of the CT coordinator. Due to the nature of the work of the CT coordinator, the rationale field is actually not required for line items dealing with pay for the CTE coordinator. All right, so let's see if you can figure this one out. In the first line, can you identify what the error is? Okay, so the activity selected from the drop-down was curriculum development, but to the right, in the description column, it talks about curriculum development and professional development. Those two things need to be coded separately. In addition, the rationale doesn't quite align. Professional development and curriculum development are not providing students with strong experience in an industry. The law is referring to instruction in that case. In the second line, what is the issue? In the description, it says professional development for teachers who are unable to be delisted. Staff refers to counselors and administrators, not teachers. These individuals would not be coded as staff, but rather individually licensed teachers. As I mentioned earlier, you cannot budget salaries for people that do not yet exist. There must be an intentional plan for academic teachers to receive professional development related to curriculum integration. It can't be general, and it must be to move a program of study forward. Curriculum development outside of contracted time, as well as professional development, must be planned for with a specific purpose and cannot be coded generically to every CTE teacher in a district. The bottom example is correct, as it identifies the business education teacher, that it's an extended contract for curriculum development, which will occur over the summer in order to align the accounting curriculum. Everything aligns, and it's very clear for the reviewer and easily approvable. Here are some examples of coding for purchase services. The top example has lots of issues. Employee travel is being purchased. Okay, but in the description, registration is listed as well. Registration is not a travel cost. Travel costs only refer to transportation, meals, hotel, and parking. Registration should be coded as you see in the second example, as a private vendor contract. It's a purchase from a trainer or conference or convention vendor. You can combine registrations into one line item as long as you clearly describe the name of the professional development. We don't require teacher names, but travel costs are only for CTE licensed teachers or teachers working in collaboration with a CTE teacher. Note how registration is indicated in the description of the correct version so that we know it is for a conference versus someone hired to provide professional development to a district. If the district was paying to bring someone in, that would be indicated in the description. It would be coded the same, but the description would be different. Okay, that was fun. Let's try this one. The top example was a common error this year. Part of the reason is because of the way it was programmed into WISE grants, which will be changed for this year. In the first example, communication was selected because the Healthcare Academy person was doing outreach. We don't know what that outreach was. The problem is that while you may be communicating with groups, The purchase of communication means a type of communication. So in the description, we should see things like printing or webcast subscription, facility rental, things like that. What is further confusing is that stipend is indicated in the description. Stipend for what? Stipends are considered salary, so time dedicated to a meeting should be coded in personnel, not communication. We also saw some cases where meetings in the description for communication. Again, what is being purchased related to communication? You don't purchase a meeting. However, you may purchase materials for a meeting, which would be indicated as such in the description. The second example is pretty good. It indicates the purchase of communication for program outreach. The description of what is being purchased is video conferencing capability. My only question would be the rationale and if it aligns. If students are gaining experience, it should probably be related to instruction, not vocational education coordination. More related to purchased services. Hopefully you've been able to follow along fairly well so far. In the first line item, membership in a business organization is not a travel expense, so it must be coded as a separate line item. The description should also include what is being attended, a conference or a meeting or other activity. Indicate what it is. The rationale section is interesting. Is the attendance at a training, meeting, or whatever is being attended specific to preparing special populations for high skill, high wage, and high demand occupations? I'd want to know, how does the membership mentioned in the description support special populations? Support for special populations should focus on programming to make CTE accessible in high skill, high wage, or high demand occupations. But it could also involve training if that is needed. So as you can see, this brings up a lot of questions for the reviewer. The second example is also not correct because the rationale and required activity is specific to the technology fields and is not related to childcare. Childcare isn't a required activity, so you won't see it listed as an option from the rationale drop-down. But it is a permissible activity, so can be selected as a permissible activity as long as the required activities are being done. So in the third example, you can see that the other permissible activities was selected with a description that is clear that it's for travel to the child care conference for professional development. In the first example, there is an elaborate description which really isn't necessary. Try to keep descriptions clear and to the point. As a result of the drop-down selections, we already know it's a sub for student field trips. For subcoding, it's not necessary to say where the trip is going. This one could say, just to be a little more clear, sub for taking students to auto skills test, as the bottom example indicates. Both of these examples are from a consortium and are line items for a district. This is fine, but to save effort, they could have been combined into one line item under Therapeutic Services POS. Just indicate the name of the conference that it's for, the registration, and how many staff. Similarly, this is for the same school within a consortium. They could have combined the two by indicating the manufacturing POS from the drop-down and included the description WCTC Manufacturing Fair and Waukesha Business Alliance for the 21st Century Manufacturing Industry Pathways Field Trip. Here we have the last purchased services example. The way that this is coded brings up a lot of questions. First, this is incorrect because a CISA or any other fiscal agent cannot contract with themselves for services. The option of CISA contract is intended for single districts or a consortium who may be contracting with a CISA for, say, professional development. The description is also confusing. All the things listed, including stakeholder engagement, collaboration with a focus on special populations, is part of the duties of a CTE coordinator or fiscal agent. So there would be no separate contract for that type of work by a fiscal agent for their members. On to capital items. The first example is not a great fit for equipment rental, but probably should have been purchase services. According to this, it was for items and services related to a career fair for the general management POS. Was it only for students in general management? This might be questioned. The other question in the first example is related to the rationale selected and highlighted in yellow. How is equipment rental designed to support special populations? Did only special populations who are general management programs of study attend the career fair? What was purchased that would meet their needs? In the second example, it begs the question, purchase of a lot of supplies to address the noncompliance with core indicators. See the rationale in yellow. How do those supplies attract male non-traditional students? To me, those items have nothing to do with attracting male students. If you select the performance indicator rationale, you must also say which indicator it's referring to in the description. Over $8,000 seems like a lot dedicated to consumable supplies. Remember, the rationale must align with the activity in the description or cannot be selected. Your budget will not be approved without clear alignment. In this description, it's not that it's actually wrong, but there is a lot of redundancy in the description. You didn't need to say for non-capital equipment or engineering and tech curriculum because instruction is already selected from the drop-down as well as the program of study, as you see in the last column. Keep like purchases together as one line item. Know what you plan to purchase. And to reduce redundancy, I've crossed out what is not needed as an example for you. In this example, all we need to know is what hand tools are being purchased for the engineering and technology in order to improve, expand, and modernize equipment. The fact that the number of hand tools is indicated is also correct, and we like to see that. First example, the selection says supplies, but the description says equipment. The question your reviewer will have is, which is it? If we're talking supplies to build a robot, then don't use the word equipment in the description, as equipment should be coded differently. In the second example, what exactly is being purchased? The description is a restatement of the rationale, but doesn't say what is being purchased. In the correct example, we see that textbooks are being purchased, that is for instruction. The description clarifies it's for a new articulated course with MATC, and the rationale for the purchase is to link secondary program to the post-secondary level program. This is a beautiful example showing clear alignment of the purchase with the requirements of the grant. Okay, so I hope we can all agree that this is a little too much detail. Here I highlighted some possible editing. We already know it's for biotech research and development. See the last column. So that did not need to be included in the description. There are a lot of different things combined here. Consider what could have been combined for one line item. Perhaps all the micropipettes could have been all lumped together with the number purchased indicated. Or the hydraulic acid power supply could have been another line item. It could be argued that things like Elmer's glue, sandwich bags, and Job's plant food, and a number of the items, while needed, are consumables, and Perkins funds should be used for those items on a limited basis. This is a more appropriate description for supplies. We need to be somewhere between every box of nails being listed and just the word tools. The only thing that could be argued here is that a socket, Allen, and hammer sets do not meet the rationale of improved, expand, or modernize equipment. These items will be looked at with more scrutiny. Remember, the focus of Perkins is to improve, expand, and update, as is stated in the rationale that was chosen. So with that, we're going to wrap it up. We are not going to go over capital objects as we don't really see issues with coding those. Once all your selections are completed and all the sections of the application are complete, you may hit Submit. You will not be able to access your budget or any part of the application again, so be sure it is ready to submit before doing so. If you hit Submit accidentally, send a message to your reviewer asking them to return it to you so that you can make the needed changes. Well, there you have it, the Perkins application and budgeting in a nutshell. If you have any questions, do not hesitate to contact me via email, as that's usually the best way. Other resources for budgeting and parameters can be found on the Perkins application website. Thank you and have a great day.